Cool, we're live. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Misha and I'm the Director of Partnerships at Bit Project. And basically this live stream is just a chance for us to go over what we're looking for the Serverless Hacks Hackathon, what kind of things you can build, what kind of prizes there are, and all the details that you need to know to participate. So before we get started, I guess Emily and Gannon, you want to quickly introduce yourselves as well?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Emily. I'm the co-director of engineering. You probably saw me sending out announcements with Beatrix, maybe hosting some sessions. So hi, and today we're going to be talking about basic guidelines for the project, and me and Getting are going to go into some specifics for tips for the project that you guys may have been wondering about.
Yep, and I'm Ganning. I'm also co-director of engineering with Emily, and I think Misha and Emily basically covered everything, but I think we also have like Q&A parts to all of this, so if you do have any questions about anything, feel free to drop it in the comments or chat, and then we'll get to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you have questions, we'll get to them. And then also if you have questions and you're watching this after it was already recorded, you can use our Discord or like Piazza to ask anything. But all right, let's get started. So basically we have our hackathon Serverless Hacks happening right now. Technically this is the third week of the hackathon, but you do still have time to make a project and submit it. The deadline is August 5th. So I think that gives us about like 2 weeks left, or a little less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, 10 days
for the deadline. Yeah. So yeah, so basically the hackathon was created as part of our serverless camp, which we hosted starting in June. Is that right? Yeah, starting in June.
That sounds right.
Basically, it's an 8-week camp where students are able to learn how to build with serverless, specifically using Microsoft Azure. And then in the final 4 weeks of the camp, they usually build a final project. So in the past, this has just been the students taking the course, but this year we decided to kind of make those last 4 weeks into a hackathon that's open to anyone. So whether or not you're a student, you're eligible to build a project and submit for prizes. So starting off, talking about a little bit about the project requirements. So basically, our requirements are really open. You don't have to have any specific type of project. The only thing it has to do is use either Microsoft Azure or AWS Lambda. So it has to be a project that uses serverless. But other than that, it's all up to you. So you can be as creative as you want. You can make any sort of thing. It doesn't have to specifically, it doesn't have to solve a specific problem. It can just be whatever you want to make. So yeah, that's the only requirement. In terms of teams, I don't think we have a team limit, but you can work in teams if you want, or you can just work individually. If you work in teams, you guys will all get individual prizes if your team wins. And then what else? Yeah, so talking a little bit about the submission guidelines. So basically, we require you to have all of your code for your project in a public repository, so all the judges, including us, can view it. So basically, to submit, you'll need to provide a URL to your repository, make sure it's public. And then the second thing for submission is a video. So this, we're requiring a 15-minute video. And basically, the purpose of this is to explain your project in detail. So the things that definitely should be included. One, an introduction to yourself and to the project, just telling us what you do and what the project is about. To explain the problem, that your project solves. So like I said before, it doesn't have to be like a real world problem. It can be something small, like if you personally have a problem day to day and you wanted to make a little app to solve that, or like anything. The problem can be like something, what are the words I'm looking for? I guess like basically the problem can be like not a real problem. Like if you're making something for fun, that can still be solving the problem of like wanting to do something fun, So it doesn't have to be very strict.
You don't have to like solve, make world peace, or like,
Yeah.
eliminate climate change, things like that. Like you can do something as simple as making it easier to like keep track of your day-to-day things. So something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really open, just anything that you feel like building. And then the next part of the video is explaining how you implemented the project. So talk about the technologies you use, talk about the tools, talk about kind of how the different aspects of your project fit together. So if there's like a front end and a back end, talk about both pieces and how they interact, things like that. And then the next thing is talking about any challenges you faced. So if you had any really hard challenges or specific bugs that you thought were interesting and took you a little bit to solve, definitely talk about those and talk about your process for how you solved whatever challenge you faced. And then lastly, talk about a little bit about like your future plans for the project. So now that you have this working project, what kind of improvements can you see yourself making in the future? What kind of features do you think would be cool to add to make it even better? Yeah, so that's basically the main points, the biggest things that you should include. Obviously, feel free to get more detailed or like add your own categories if you think something is relevant that you want to include in your submission. But at the very minimum, do include those points. And all of this, by the way, is listed in our dev post. So that's where the hackathon is hosted. That's where you can get all this information about the guidelines and submission. And that's also where you would submit your actual project at the end. So yeah, definitely feel free to check out the dev post if you want to reference most of the things we talk about in this video. And then, yeah, I think that's kind of it for submission requirements. So it really just is the GitHub repo and the video. And then I do want to talk a little bit about awards. So we are going to have prizes for the winners of the hackathon. So judging will be done by our Bit project team. So it'll include Emily Ganning and myself, and then we'll also have our coworkers Shreya and Beatrix helping out with judging too. So I'll talk. Emily and Ganning will talk about the judging criteria in a little bit, but before we get to that, the prizes themselves, we're going to have 3 different categories. So one is going to be our team's like Bit Projects prizes that we're giving out. And then we're also going to have, because we have 2 sponsors, we're going to have sponsor specific categories. So Courier is a sponsor that has its own API. So using Courier's API in the best way is what will qualify you to win that prize. And then we also have Microsoft as our second sponsor, and that prize will just be the most creative use of a Microsoft Azure service. So obviously, Microsoft Azure itself is going to be used by a lot of the submissions, but this is this is more specific to like using an additional Microsoft service, not just Azure, that will qualify you for this prize. So those are the 2 sponsor prizes, and then our prize will be judging based on our own criteria. So I'll hand it over to Emily or Ganning, whoever wants to talk a little bit about the submission.
Yeah, I guess I can start with judging criteria. So I think like overall, it's designed to be pretty vague, so you can tackle whichever idea or problem or anything you want to do, really. But however, like across everything, when we're actually judging a project to determine whether or not you're getting the best use of Microsoft Azure or something like that, we have a list of like 5 points, I believe. Yeah, 5 points that try to abide by, I guess, in your video. And yeah, the first one, I guess, is creativity. So it's like, did your project take an original approach to the problem, right? So if we go off of one example of, I think one of the projects, this serverless camp, is the fact that you can't find bathrooms in Purdue's campus, right? Mm-hmm. So one way to tackle that might be to, let's say, put up more bathroom signs, right? But a more creative way, I suppose, might be to create an app that says, here's a bathroom. So it's essentially talking about how you decide to tackle the problem. And this is essentially doing like your brainstorm stage.
Yeah,
Emily, do you want to talk about the second one?
Yeah. So just wanted to add on to what Ganning said about creativity. He gave a really good example. So when you're thinking about this point, it's more of Did you think of something that makes someone else say, wow, I didn't think of that? Or it might be something like a new approach to a problem that makes someone realize that there are other paths or solutions. So bringing up multiple solutions, maybe the problem has already been solved, but being creative is finding another path to that solution. And then the next thing is design. So the three key questions listed on DevPost are: is the design well thought out? Did the team make smart design choices? And is the project user friendly? So I would say this more deals with your app's UI. So less of your idea, more with how you design the user interface. If you see certain websites that might be outdated, you might think that it's very hard to navigate. So that would be an example of bad design. A good example would be an app that you find very pleasing to the eye, but also not overly cluttered. So that sort of design that is very functional, but also very appealing. Like you look at it and you say, wow, this person did a great job. I think it's like kind of artistic, but also simple to understand. That's what we're looking for. And then, Ganny, do you want to talk about the real world application?
Yeah, of course. I did see two things in this chat. I think Shreya, you asked a question, and Unquestionable Brad asked a question. Do you want to answer that now or after this judging criteria part? Or
I think just get through the criteria first, and then we can like pause and answer any questions.
yeah, sounds good. Okay, so real world application, it's basically exactly like it sounds like. So is your app feasible or whatever you're creating feasible, right? So if we go off of like the Purdue bathroom finder example, right? Is your implementation going to be something that takes $1 million a month to operate? That's not really feasible, right? I mean, unless you're super crazy rich. So yeah, is it cost efficient, and is it something that people would actually consider using, I guess, is what we're mainly looking for there. Emily, if you want to talk about the extra mile.
Yeah. So when we think about the extra mile, we're really looking for effort and going, just like it's evident that the team put in a lot of time into their project. So I think it's also easy for participants to tell in comparison between two projects where one team didn't really put that much effort in, like maybe their video is a bit short, they seemed kind of rushed. Um, Maybe the design is half-hearted, or maybe it just didn't seem like they put a lot of thought into their idea. The extra mile is really showing that you care about your project. And what I mean by that is you pay attention to details. So, for example, when you're presenting, you might list certain use cases, like something like that. Or you might bring up some points where your project might not work. So, really thinking through the problem and identifying points where either your project is really good at, or maybe potential weaknesses of your project. So, just when you're pitching your project, show that you thought out your idea well and that you put in effort. Anything to add into that?
Yeah, I think another part could be like, sure, you've built out your idea that you planned out originally, right? Are there any extra features that you do want to add to this? Because unlike like a 24-hour hackathon, this is a bit of a longer one. So you will have extra time to add like maybe a new feature that you did want to add or incorporate into your app. Yeah. And yeah, I guess I can go straight into the last judging criteria, which is pitch. In my opinion, this is arguably like the most important one, I think, because without a great pitch, no one's going to understand what your idea is, right? And the big chunk of the pitch is, I think, figuring out how you phrase your problem that your app is designed to solve. So maybe, let's say you create an app that maybe detects the price of a Pokemon card or something like that. That might not be as something as like big as solving climate change, but if you want to pitch the problem in a way that maybe uses humor, I think is a really big one. I think when it comes to pitch, so maybe incorporating a little bit of humor, but also like framing it in a way that everyone's able to understand and can relate to in some way or another is framing the problem well. And also when you're actually presenting your product, right, describing like the technicalities behind it, how are you going to present your product to an audience that maybe doesn't have the most technical experience, right? So maybe instead of mentioning every single language that you used and what every single line of code does, which isn't likely going to be the best option considering that your audience might not understand code, but figuring out how to grasp the big picture or like the moving parts in your application, right? So let's say once I click this button, it's going to send data to a server, right? Maybe I don't understand how a server works, but I still understand like the general idea of it, and I understand how complicated it can be, but without actually having to dive into like super complicated stuff. So I think pitch is like having a good balance of knowing how to communicate your ideas and actually creating a great product.
Yeah, and I just want to add real quick. Yeah, so I think, yeah, everything Ganning said is definitely super important. Just being able to explain your project, explain your details to people who don't know the intricacies of everything that you wrote or everything that you're working on. And I will say in this case, since we do have the 15-minute submission, video submission, it is okay. Like that's not to say that you shouldn't talk about the technical aspects, because in this case, we're also judging the project based on some of that part too. So definitely like I mentioned before with like the points to follow in your video submission, don't be afraid to get technical, but also make sure that you're talking about, at some point you're talking about the project from that view of like, I'm presenting this to people who may or may not have technical experience, so I'm going to explain at a high level what the project does and how it works. And then of course you can dive into some details just for judging purposes as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds great. Thank you guys for going over the judging criteria. Did we say that there were questions?
Yeah,
in
there's
the chat?
one question from Cole. So Cole asked, do you have to be in the mentor program to submit a project? And the answer is no, you do not have to be in the mentor program to submit a project to the hackathon. Hackathon is open to everyone. Even if you didn't finish the serverless curriculum, you are welcome to participate. So as long as you incorporate serverless, either Microsoft Azure or AWS, into your project is eligible. And yeah, we are looking forward to everyone's projects.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Just you don't have to have even like taken the serverless curriculum course part at all. Even if you're just joining us, found out about the hackathon, and didn't participate in the camp, that's totally fine. You can still submit. So, yeah, open to everyone. Was that the only question in the chat?
Two more.
Oh, there's
Oh, two more. Okay.
Oh, I
Yep.
guess refresh. Yeah.
It was in like the
Oh, it's in
Twitch
the chat.
Twitch
Okay.
chat. Yeah. So I think this question, Misha, you might be best to answer. So the question was, so my submission could be like 10% Microsoft service and 90% Google services and still be eligible.
Yeah, so you're allowed to use different services. I would just really the only requirement is that you are using a serverless platform, and we're specifically asking you to use Microsoft Azure or AWS Lambda. So if you're using, like you said, 10% Microsoft service, if your project is still using Azure on Microsoft, that should be fine. Yeah, that hopefully that answers that. And then what was there a third question?
Yeah, the third one. So what Azure services do you recommend we use? Something that's easy to integrate into like a beginner level project.
Okay, I think you guys can probably answer that.
I guess I'll give one and then I'll hand it off to you, Emily, to I guess give one of your ideas. I think a pretty cool thing about Azure is their live translation API. So like you can, I think they have it so that you can even like put it into like a simple HTML JavaScript page, and you can literally just talk and it'll translate. If I'm talking English, I can translate it into French, Chinese, or any other language that Azure supports. And I just thought that was really cool without using like a ton of code to actually do it.
I would suggest just looking. So we covered two main Azure services for storing data, which are blob storage and Cosmos DB. I highly encourage using those because they're very easy to integrate into any project. For example, for Cosmos DB, you can store user information. For blob storage, you can store user files. So using either of the two are very easy to incorporate into any idea that you're working with right now. Another one that's pretty popular is, I think, remind me if I forget, I think it's the Azure computer vision API.
Yeah, I think the overarching one is cognitive services, and then the
Cognitive
subset
services. Okay.
is
So
Azure.
basically, literally any service within the cognitive services subcategory, there's a ton of cool things related to machine learning, like identifying objects, getting the words from a picture. So let's say if someone took a picture of a something they bought, maybe a nutrition label. The API can actually extract that data from the picture. And with your beginner level project, you can just do something with the data and analyze it somehow and display it to the user. So a lot of APIs under that category are super cool and relatively very easy to incorporate into your project.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, and then just a note, so like because all of these are Microsoft services, they do have pretty extensive documentation online for how to use everything. We do have the Azure Docs linked in our dev post, I believe. But yeah, other than that, like it's very easy. You can just Google Microsoft Azure, check out their website, and they have listed all their services and different docs with how to use them and how to get started. So yeah, and then if you do end up having any technical questions, you are free to use our serverless camp piazza and ask questions there. We have our team as well as some mentors monitoring that platform. Yeah, and then so I think the next thing we wanted to talk about was a little bit more about the project itself, why we have a project, some ideas and things like that. But before we do that, I think we already went over this information, but I think it would be helpful to just quickly screen share the dev post page just to show you guys what we're talking about. So I will share my screen real quick.
And while Misha's sharing her screen, I just want to talk about, like, quickly answer the question of the purpose of building your project, and getting, feel free to add on to this. But I think the main purpose of building a project is, one, the very shallow level reason is to put it on your resume. You know, like everyone knows that having projects is great for your resume. So that's a very shallow level. At a deeper level, we want you guys to build projects because we feel like that's the best way to learn. Is to actually apply your skills rather than following a tutorial and building stuff that way. So the main reason is to learn, and two, it's fun, and three, it's very rewarding to have your own project and, you know, be able to show others that what you've built. And as you get more advanced, as you collect more skills, the project is there for you to be able to build onto. You can build more features as you gain more knowledge and experience, in things even outside of serverless. So I would say the biggest thing motivator, I guess, is to learn, to apply your skills. Getting, do you have anything to add on to that?
I guess I can add on to like when you're actually doing it, it might be difficult at times because like you might get this bug and it's like, why is it not working? My code is exactly the same as what it says on the documentation, right? In times like those, it can get really demoralizing and demotivating, I guess. And my solution, I guess, what I do that helps me when that happens is sometimes I just go ahead, take a break. I go on a bike ride, or I just go walk outside for a while, or maybe I'm done coding for that day. I'll look at it again tomorrow, and for some reason it makes sense. But if not, again, we're always here for you. So if you want to post on Piazza, we are here to always look at your question as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think those were all really great points. And I also want to add, like, for people who maybe are not already working in tech, if you're looking for internships or jobs, having this kind of project where you did something outside of like a class or something looks really great. It just shows that you have a lot of initiative, and it's also a different way to showcase your skills. Of course, everyone like can always write on their resume what skills you have, what languages you're familiar with, etc. But having an actual project to show that really goes a long way. It kind of sets you apart from people who maybe don't have any of their own projects. And I think that's especially important for people if you're coming from maybe a non-traditional background. You didn't necessarily study computer science or go to university for that. It really is useful because it honestly, you don't need a tech degree to work in tech, but if you don't have one, having the projects and things to showcase your skills really goes a long way. And then before we move on to the next thing, I don't have the screen sharing permissions set up on my work laptop right now. So can someone else share their screen and show the dev post? I would have to like restart Chrome.
Ganning, can you try that? Because I very often have screen sharing issues with
I can try my best.
Okay.
Oh, it worked this time. That's
okay.
a new one. Okay, can y'all see this? Wait, can you see this? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so the URL, I guess, for this is serverless-hacks.devpost.com. Go, if you want to go ahead and enter this hackathon, I'll give you a quick overview about like the different pages on here. So, wait, yeah, right. Or is there any other thing I should go over?
No, that's fine. I think the information that is on the overview itself, we did go over already, but just, yeah, showing them the interface.
Cool, sounds good. So right here is going to be the overview of it. First button you're going to want to click. You want to go ahead and click join, or actually, yeah, this is the homepage about this stuff. What we were talking about just now were requirements. So what to build the video. Misha explained these sections right here. She also talked about the prizes, judge team, and also me and Emily were talking about the judging criteria earlier. So what we're actually looking for. We have the deadline. So we have 11 more days. We have the number of participants right here, self-explanatory, but yeah. So first thing you want to click is go ahead and click join hackathon. And it should, yeah, it will go ahead and take me to this page. So let's say I am working solo, dev post, or bit project actually, website, and then agree to these. Then if you want to go ahead and click register. So once you go ahead and register, you're going to be prompted to, you're going to be taken to this page where you can actually go ahead and submit a project. And I think the rest of these pages, participants, who's in here, resources, I think, yeah. So the documentations that we have, rules, self-explanatory, the projects. So this is when we publish this everywhere, everyone's projects will be shown here. So if you submit something to this hackathon, it will be right here. Updates and discussions. I'm not going to lie, I've never really used. I've never really had a use case for it. So yeah, the big thing is going to be my project. So when you create a project, you're going to want to go ahead and click create project. Then it should take you to this page. So right here is where you're able to save your progress, develop your project, right? And then if I want to just go ahead and create project name, I guess, Ganning, oh, I spelled my name wrong, Ganning's project, right? So as you type, you get to see like a preview of your project card. Elevator pitch, continue, right here. So this is where you want to almost create like a technical write-up of your project. So pretend that you are writing like a blog about your project. What would you want to cover, right? And they have a structure right here. So what inspired you, what you learned, how you built it. And this is written in Markdown. So a bit of advice I guess I would give for this is don't actually write it in here. A pretty good source for writing Markdown is HackMD, I think. Emily, I think, actually introduced me to this. Yeah, so if you want to just go ahead and sign in and make an account for HackMD.
It's Google Drive for Markdown files, basically.
Yeah.
And if you have teammates, it's especially helpful because you can share it like a Google Doc, give them a link, and then everyone can work on it at the same time.
Yep. And like this text is pretty cryptic, but once it's actually rendered, these hashtags in Markdown, they denote like a heading. But like in HackMD, you're able to see like how big everything is, right? So, yep. And then
also,
built with.
Let me just quickly add, because I know a lot of the things in the about the project section, these are going to be a lot of things that you're already talking about in your video as well. So hopefully it's not really like extra work, because I know our submission does require that 15-minute video, but ideally I think everything in this list right now is something that you would cover in your video. So if you're making an outline for your video and like kind of practicing and then finally recording it, a lot of that information you can directly use in this. I'm sure like you can reuse some of the phrasing, the different like categories and things like that. It's all for the same project, so it's totally fine to, if it's like a little repetitive with your video versus this part.
Yep, exactly.
And you can also use, sorry, I interrupted you again.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can use this, like write this up first and then use it as an outline for your video. So you're kind of planning for your video ahead and you're not really doing any double work, and it's all, cycle and it works well.
Yep.
Yes, I definitely agree. Yeah, after this, so what you built it with, let's say I used Python, go ahead and enter that. And then this is almost like just listing everything that you use. So you'll probably have Azure in there. If you use AWS, you'll have AWS in there. If you use cognitive services in Azure, put that in here. Stuff like that. Try it out links. So right here, I would put your GitHub repository where you have your project stored. If you deploy your project and it's accessible by everyone, go ahead and add like the URL where it's accessible. So if it's a web app, but it's totally cool if you don't have it totally deployed. We can always look at what you created in your video as well. Project media, this is going to be just, it's not required. It looks nice if you do have it though. So when you click into your project, it's going to be what's like at the big top of it, I guess. So you can go ahead and play around what you put in here and then save and continue and preview it. So you actually know what I'm talking about, because I know what I'm talking about might be a bit abstract right now. And right here's the video demo link. So go ahead and upload your video to YouTube, or if you prefer something else, upload it there, that's fine. And then place your 15-minute YouTube video link in this box, right? Then go ahead and click save and continue. And it won't let me continue. Okay, there we go. Because it won't let me continue because I didn't fill any of this out and it's required. But yeah, additional information, so project title, GitHub URL, stuff like that. And then when you're done, you can go ahead and click submit. And then this is the Ganning's project page that I made just now that has absolutely zero content on it. But yeah, awesome. That is, whoa, how to stop sharing. That is how I stop sharing.
Thank you for demonstrating dev posts to us. I think we can go ahead and move on to project ideas. So we already talked about the purpose of building a project. Ganning, do you have any suggestions for thinking of a project idea?
Yeah, sure. So first thing I would look at is stuff that you're facing in your daily life that you want to solve, right? So maybe I find doing XYZ very inconvenient. So how can I create something to solve that? Something else is like maybe just creating something for fun, I think. So maybe it's not a problem in your daily life. I think Emily and Misha already touched on this. So like maybe you want to create something that detects the price of a Pokemon card and checks if it's rare or not. That might be a pretty good idea. And yeah, those are my 2 tips. Emily, if you want to talk about like how you can narrow down an idea. So like maybe you want to solve climate change. How can you solve climate change with code?
Great question. Okay, so when you might have like a general direction that you want to go. So for example, let's say you wanted to analyze Spotify data, that's one direction, or you wanted to solve climate change, that's another option. The first option I just said, the Spotify problem, that's pretty easy to narrow down based on your own experience. But I would say if you're going for more global problems like climate change, what's another big global problem? Like diversity,
World hunger,
tech, things like that, right?
Yep.
So if you're going for those larger global scale problems, you're going to need to do a bit of research. And through your research, through reading, you might find smaller problems that you can solve. So an example is like, let's say you want to solve climate change by decreasing carbon emissions. Now let's narrow it down a bit further. If you Google carbon emissions, you can figure out that cars have a lot of carbon emissions. Narrow down that further, you can figure out that choosing the correct path, like a specific way when you're driving, can be more carbon efficient. So things like that, just continuing to research and narrow down your idea into a smaller and smaller, more feasible project pathway is one way you could do it with a more global issue. With more, fun ideas that generally are only applicable to certain people. Like Ganning was saying, you might want to solve a problem in your daily life. Let's say I wanted to solve the issue that this was my project idea. It takes forever for me to upload a picture onto my computer. I would continue narrowing it further. I would identify that why I couldn't do it, how I could fix it. Just asking those questions to yourself. The third thing I was going to talk about is something like a fun project. So let's say you wanted to analyze Spotify data. This is where you can be very creative because your project doesn't necessarily have to go in a certain path, because there really isn't a solution to a fun project. They're more for entertainment and for people to enjoy. So you could think about ways that it would be fun to see your data visualized. You could think about, what would people like to see? Maybe people want a playlist created for them that's, curated to their taste, or maybe they want to see it visualized in some way. They listen to this artist X% of the time, etc. So I guess I hope that answers your question, what you're talking about, Ganning, about how to narrow down your project once you have like a broad idea.
That's also why you use AirDrop.
Yeah.
Get a Mac.
Now I have my ecosystem, so
That's hilarious. Cool. I guess we can talk about past projects overview if you want to talk about that. Maybe you can talk about a couple and then I can talk about 2 or 3.
Yeah, sounds great. So we're gonna have like some projects that are gonna be on our old blogs. So we have a ton of them from previous students, and I'm just gonna talk about a few. If you just go to our website and then click on the blog tab, you'll be able to see blogs with banners on them that have the project names. So I want to talk about first, I think, Evelyn's project. So I'm going to share my screen, or attempt to share. Let's see if that works. Okay. I think it does work. Okay. Awesome. So this is Evelyn's project, and she actually fought climate change. And I thought her solution was very creative, and you'll see why. So basically, her application helps reduce your carbon footprint by alerting users of regional power grid demand. So she narrowed her project down into a very specific segment, which is power grid demand. You can read more into the actual, actual issue if you don't really understand how power grids can influence your personal carbon footprint. But hers was basically a form, and you could enter your name. She used Twilio's API and a timer trigger that sent a text message using Twilio at a certain time whenever the power grid usage was high. And you can see how she used Cosmos DB as well to store the phone numbers and the regional location of the user. So this was super cool. This is one example of not solving the problem, but helping work toward the solving climate change. Let's see, I feel like I'm in, let me think which one I want to show off. Okay, let's see. Slackbot. I thought this one was pretty cool. So basically, you guys, if you're GSC students, you should be pretty familiar with Piazza. Last year when we had Piazza, David basically took all of that data from Piazza and then put it in a database. And he used a serverless Slack bot that learned from the information that was in Piazza to answer student questions. And you can see his flow chart here and what he used. He basically created a Slack bot. And here you go. You can see he explained each software application that he used. And I would say these blogs are really helpful because they show and explain how the person actually used each tool. So it not only gives you ideas for tools, it also provides you explanations for how to apply them. And yeah, those are 2 cool projects. Genny, do you want to share some?
Yeah, sure. If I can get my computer to share my screen. Let's do this. Awesome. Can y'all see this? Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. So the first one that I wanted to share was this one. This was Grace's project, kind of similar to Evelyn's. It was about climate change. So Grace built this actually before Google Maps started having that feature where it was like, this route is the most eco-friendly. So in a way, Google copied Grace. So yes, but essentially her project was, instead of comparing routes just based on whether or not like the time it takes to travel between A and B, it's going to actually consider the carbon emissions that it would take to travel from A to B. And I just thought that was pretty neat because at least in my mind, I haven't really heard of anything that's actually done that before. And it's actually pretty neat because it almost makes you feel good about taking this route instead of just picking some random route on Google Maps. And yeah, I just thought this project was really neat. Another one was Beatrix's project. Beatrix is helping us host this live stream, by the way, so big shout out to her. And I love this project. 1, because I love food. 2, because it's really cool. So yeah, essentially, I think what Beatrix's project is it was designed to solve the problem of a lot of people just, hi Beatrix. Yeah, it was designed to just solve the problem of a lot of people not eating breakfast or some meal of their day when they're supposed to, right? I guess Beatrix, I'll hand it off to you if you actually want to talk about it.
Hi, yeah, I'm actually the former students from last year. So my project was talking about how students or everyone can get the reminder like lunch, breakfast, and they can even generate the recipe based on their preference. So if you type in the SMS, you want to type in bread, and then they can generate the recipe for you. That's basically my project, and I use timer trigger. Timer function, and what's called another one? I forgot. Actually, I use like 2 APIs, food APIs, timer trigger, Twilio SMS to get the SMS, and Tasty API. Yeah, basically that's what my project is. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
It looks really awesome. Yeah, great job on this. Cool. Let's see if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen. There we go. Nice.
All right, so we talked about past projects. So we basically covered a lot of the topics on building your project. But now that you've thought of your idea, maybe you already know the purpose of building your project, maybe you already started coding. So when you start coding, the thing you're going to encounter, which Canning mentioned earlier, is debugging. Right? So we got a question earlier, which is right on time because it is our topic in our session. Do you have any tips for debugging? Sometimes it takes forever to debug. And yeah, I totally get it. It's it really sucks. Debugging sucks, but do you want to I guess I can start us off with some tips. So the first tip I would have is build your project in small parts. You don't want to test at the very end. I used to do that and it was horrible because then you'd have, once you solved one error message, another one would pop up and you just go through this endless loop of figuring out where your error actually started. And then by the time you get there, you create another one. So all in all, the short answer to that is, split your project into segments. Once you build a small feature, start testing it immediately. Make sure that small feature works before you move on, because that'll save a lot of time in the future, even though it might seem like ineffective in the middle and you want to keep coding. That's probably my biggest tip. Let me think. I think another tip is to comment your code. So So if you don't comment your code, so backstory, the counselor bot, I didn't comment the codes. I think I should go back and do that. But it can get really confusing really fast if you have a big project and you're working on another part and then you come back to the other part of the project and for some reason it's airing out and you can't figure out why because you don't know why you wrote that line of code like a week ago. So always comment your code, even if it seems really dumb, just, add a line there and it'll help you save time in the future when you forget later what that line of code meant. Danny, I'll pass it off to you if you have any.
Actually, real quick, I just wanted to add to both great tips. I wanted to add to Emily's first tip about making your projects kind of in small increments. So yeah, it's really important to like make a little bit of the project, stop at a point where it makes sense, and then test it. But one thing specifically that will really help with that is really planning out your project before you start anything at all. So if you like kind of just start blindly, you have like an idea and then you just like start coding immediately, it'll be kind of tough to know what those small pieces are and like where to stop in your process, in your development process to actually test things. So the best way to avoid that is once you have your idea, really sit down and kind of make a list of all the different tools and technologies, including like APIs or Microsoft services, whatever specific things you want to use. And then try to make kind of, I think you saw in some of the blogs where we required past students to make like a flow chart. That's really helpful because it kind of it kind of visually represents everything that you're going to have to do in your project. And it gives you a really good place to figure out like, okay, I have this one piece and this other piece, and I'm going to have to code them separately, and then eventually they'll connect. And when you're actually starting the project and doing those pieces, you'll know after the first one, okay, I can stop and I know what this small portion is supposed to do, so I can test it before I make the next part. So yeah, just in general, planning is really, really important. And it'll specifically help with the debugging tips that Emily mentioned. Yeah, all right, Ganning, you can talk about some of your tips.
Yeah, I guess instead of going high level, I'll go a bit more like detailed. So I think Beatrix put in the chat, VS Code does have a debugger. So it's essentially something that allows you to step through your code. We're not going to demo it here just for sake of time, but if you want to go ahead and Google, I'm sure there's like a billion tutorials out there. So it essentially allows you to pause your code to see like, so I've reached this point, right? And it allows you to see at this point, variable X has this value, variable Y has this value. And it allows you to essentially click a button and it's going to allow you to keep going to the next line and next line. So it's going to save you a ton of time doing all those console.log. This value is XYZ. So that's really good. Also, if you're doing web dev, JavaScript has something, I think it's in JavaScript, not just in VS Code, but if you just type the word debugger in JavaScript, it should pause that code when you click inspect element, and it should allow you to actually step through your code in inspect element. So there's two debuggers out there, VS Code and native JavaScript, which are both really useful.
Yeah, and in general, like most languages have that like a debugger sort of option. So depending on what you're using or what you're most familiar with, you can always Google the debugger options for that. And usually there'll be a lot of documentation and tutorials that you can kind of check out and set up your own environment so that you can walk through code as well.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so I hope that answered your question to whoever asked the debugging one. But now we're going to open it up to more questions. So feel free to just put them in the chat or the Slido, and we will get to them as they come in. I think we had another question earlier about whether the video should be 15 minutes max, or if you're allowed to create less than 15 minutes. So our suggestion is that you create a video between the range of 14 to 16 minutes. Now, this might sound like a lot of time, but when you're actually presenting your project and you're going through each section of our rubric, it'll take up 15 minutes. minutes. Like you won't even notice it go by. You're gonna look at the timer and you're gonna think, wow, okay, I don't have that much time left. So you might actually go over time. So we would recommend the video be between 14 to 16 minutes because remember, you're also going to be demoing your project. So that's also going to take up some time. But if you have any timing concerns, feel free to reach out to us and then we can, discuss any concerns you may have. So that's for the timing question.
Yeah, and then I want to quickly add, because Emily mentioned that you would probably demo your project. I don't, just looking at the dev post, I guess it's not explicitly stated, but in addition to all the points I was going through earlier, like introducing yourself, explaining the problem, explaining how you implemented it. When you're explaining how you implemented it, it probably would make sense to also share your screen and record your screen and basically just show the project in action, show what it looks like to a user and kind of step through how a user would actually use your project. So yeah, that'll definitely take some time as well. And all the points that we went over before, they do add up. So it really, like 15 minutes, like Emily said, it sounds like a lot, but you probably will have like a decent amount of time taken up just by the bare minimum requirements for the video. And then if you want to add some of your own points to talk about, it shouldn't be too hard, hopefully, to get to that 15-minute mark. Yeah, and then I don't know if Beatrix, do we have any other questions? I didn't see any. I don't have the Twitch open, so I don't know if we have Twitch questions.
Kenny, do you see any more questions?
I don't see anything looking at the chat right now.
Okay. Oh, I actually, before I forget, I did want to add something I forgot to mention before when I was talking about prizes. So the actual specifics have not been announced yet, but we will be announcing them next week. So yeah, just be on the lookout for that. We will update the dev post, and I'm pretty sure we'll probably make an announcement on Discord or something as well, just to let people know. But yeah, those details will be there next week.
I think one person asked about can the serverless camp final project be submitted to serverless hacks? So basically, it's only applied to GSC program, a global student community program, that can submit their final project to serverless hacks. For the mentorship students, unfortunately, it's not allowed to submit to serverless hacks. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, in general, if you are taking the serverless camp with us and you're not part of our small community of mentored students, then yeah, you're free to submit your project. The specific requirements for the serverless camp final project are the same as the serverless hacks requirements. That's kind of like the reason we made this into a hackathon. It's intended to be like the same type of project. So yeah, if you if you didn't take the camp with us, but you're a beginner and you kind of want to learn a little bit more and kind of don't know where to start, our curriculum is free. And on our GitHub, it's open source, so anyone can go check out the curriculum. You can walk through it a little bit. It's a really good way to get started with serverless and honestly, like web development as well. It walks you through some basics, has you create some really, really simple projects that are a great starting point for making your own serverless project. So yeah, if you're interested and you want to know more, definitely check that out. And then you can kind of use that information to build your own project for this hackathon. Yeah, I think we kind of went over everything. If there aren't any other questions, we can probably wrap up. Let me see. Yeah, Emily, Ganning, Beatrix, do you guys have anything else to add?
I think that's about it. Yeah. I guess just last reminders. Try to keep working on your project. Don't procrastinate, especially on the video, because you're gonna have to record that after. And then all the information's on Dev Post. If you do have questions, ask in Piazza. And yeah, I think we've covered everything. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for joining us though.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up here. So thanks everyone. And yeah, hopefully, like Emily said, try not to procrastinate, get your submissions in, and we're looking forward to seeing everyone's cool projects.
Yeah, thank you for sticking around for the past, I think next week,
Hour,
this is 7th
Yeah.
week, so past 6 weeks. We're almost there.
All right. All right, I think we can end it here. Bye, everyone.
See ya.